mention of what we think is the most important thing we'll consider for the weekend. And while that is designed to be considered on Sunday morning, which is our shortest period, it won't be possible to deal with it in that period, so we want to introduce it now. And the reason why we'd like to introduce it now is because we think it can make the basis of many discussions between here and when we leave to depart from this place. And it's the matter, brothers and sisters, that are mentioned in verse 12 of Exodus chapter 28, where we read in verse 12, "Thou shalt put the 2 stones upon the shoulders of the ephod for stones of memorial unto the children of Israel, and Aaron shall bear their names before Yahweh." There are a lot of occasions in the ritual of the law and in other parts of the Old Testament scripture, and indeed the New, where bearing and laying on of hands is mentioned. And some of them we can see in verse 29 of Exodus 28. "Aaron shall bear the names of the children of Israel in the breastplate of judgment upon his heart." We can turn over the page and we can see in verse 36 and 37 and 38. "Thou shalt make a plate of pure gold and engrave upon it like the engravings of a signet, holiness to Yahweh. And thou shalt put it on a blue lace, and that it may be upon the mitre, and upon the forefront of the mitre it shall be, and it shall be upon Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things, which the children of Israel hallow in all their holy gifts," and so on. So there's a number of little statements that we'd like to consider in discussion among ourselves for the next 24 hours or so, because they do turn out to be extremely important little statements, and they will help us enormously by correctly deciphering them. We will be helped enormously in our understanding of the work of God in Christ, just by examining what these little phrases mean. Laying on of the hands, bearing iniquity, bearing the iniquity of the holy things, and all sorts of phrases that there are like that. And I want to list a few off, brothers and sisters, that you might be able to consider in the next little while. Exodus 29, verses 10 and 19, it says, "Aaron and his sons shall put their hands on something." Verse 15 says, "Aaron and his sons shall put their hands." So it's again putting of hands. We want to try and find out what that actually conveys to us. And we will take some time to arrive at a proper conclusion, because it's not always the same things that are put. For example, Moses put his hand on Joshua when he was inducted into his role as leader after Moses was going to pass off the scene. We can go to Leviticus chapter 1 verse 4. He'll put his hand, that is the offerer, puts his hand on the head of his sin offering. And it continues through chapter 4 in a number of places. In Leviticus chapter 3, the offerer lays his hand on the head of the peace offering in 3 verses, 2, 8 and 13. In chapter 4, it's in verse 4, verse 15, verse 24, verse 29 and verse 33. In Leviticus 8 verse 14, Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the bullock for a national sin offering. In Leviticus 16, which will form the centre of our thoughts on Sunday morning, God willing, he'll lay both, this is the high priest on the Day of Atonement, he'll lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, and the goat will go away into the wilderness. In Leviticus 24 verse 14, there was the commandment to bring forth the man who was cursed because he picked up or he'd done something wrong, and there were witnesses to his crime. Everybody that heard the crime or saw the crime had to lay their hands on the victim, on the culprit. So there's all sorts of different ways and different reasons why the hands were laid on an animal or a person. And as we've said, it's going to be our attempts to decipher exactly what they mean in every occasion that they mean, because they do mean different things. It's not just so easy to say, well, somebody's hands were laid on here, that means this, and full stop, and it applies everywhere. It just does not apply everywhere. Even when the hand is put on the head of an animal, on one occasion it will be one thing, and on another occasion it will be another. And that will be determined by the context in which these phrases occur. Now, brothers and sisters, we've used this little illustration before, but we do have to be careful about Bible words and Bible phrases. We've got to make sure that they fit the context. And there's a very simple illustration. If I say red to you in the context of a sunset, you have a very lovely feeling as a result. But if I say red in the context of a road accident, you have an extremely different feeling. Comes straight away. So the word red means the same in both usages, but it's fitted into a context which demands of you to understand the context, not just simply the colour red. Now this goes on in a number of places in Old Testament and in New Testament scriptures. So there's some things that we ought to think about in the next day or so. Now when we come to any matter in the law of Moses, there's one cardinal principle upon which we must operate. As a matter of fact, it's not only in the law of Moses, it's everywhere in the Bible. And the cardinal principle is that there is nothing that God sets in motion among men, there is no law that He has given among men that is an end in itself. The laws of God, the commandments of God, the rituals of God in the Old Testament scriptures are all a means to an end. And the end result is clearly seen on the high priest of Israel. Because the most prominent thing on that man, as he walked around in his priestly regalia, was the golden plate on the mitre. And it had on there inscribed, "Holiness to Yahweh." So we need to ask ourselves, brethren and sisters and young people, what is holiness? Well, there's a lot of things that are holy. There's a lot of things that are unclean. There's a lot of laws and commandments of God. And if we are right in saying they all tend to the eventual end of holiness, holiness must be, as it were, a shroud that goes over everything else. And it is. It is actually the spirit that God intended when He set in motion all the laws and the rituals and the commandments and the precepts and the statutes that He's given to us. He wants for us to develop a spirit of holiness. And that spirit of holiness can only be developed within the scaffolding that Yahweh has made. And they're all a means to an end. The laws of God are mere, and I do not wish to degrade them, but when the overall purpose is considered, they are mere scaffolding. So you see a multi-story office block going up in the city of Houston, and you cannot see what it's like for all the scaffolding that's around it. But when the building is finished, you see a marvellous edifice to men. And the scaffolding has been extremely important in the construction of that edifice. And it's so with the laws and the commandments of God. They are extremely important. But they are building up to an end. And the end is holiness. And the Apostle Paul tells us that without holiness, no man will see the Lord. So it's pretty important, isn't it, to think about the dimension of holiness. It's utterly essential that we attain to a spirit of holiness. Because, as we quoted from Paul in Hebrews chapter 12, without it no man will see the Lord. And we all want to see the Lord. So when we think about these matters, brothers and sisters, we're going to go to some words in Exodus chapter 29, verse 45 and 46. Verse 45 and 46. I will dwell among the children of Israel, and will be their God. And they shall know that I am Yahweh their God, that brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, that I may dwell among them. I am Yahweh their Elohim. Now I know, brothers and sisters, that last time we were here, we talked about some of these matters at North Houston. And there would be a number of you who were not there, so we're not really overlapping anything. But coming back to Exodus chapter 25, which is saying exactly the same thing as Exodus 29, verses 45 and 46. In chapter 25, we have the statement that is made by God in verse 8, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. It is a very significant truth that when God went about giving instructions to Moses about the manufacture, the design and the manufacture of this tabernacle, the first thing that God described was the ark in the most holy place. He didn't start on the outside at the courtyard and the gate of the courtyard. He started right in the very centre, and he worked outward. As he came from the most holy place, and the ark with the golden coverlet and the four horns and the cherubic figures, he worked into the holy place, through the veil into the holy place, and described all the furniture in there, then went out into the courtyard and described the altar of burnt sacrifice and the laver, and then went out to the courtyard. Now, brothers and sisters, it's very, very clear, isn't it, that if he works from the centre outward, God was in the Shekinah glory. So it's God manifestation, isn't it? Our view might be human salvation, but that's not God's view. Now we can find that that's the truth very, very easily. Do you remember, brothers and sisters, what is the cardinal characteristic of Yahweh that we need today? What is number one that we need? What was that, Brady? Yes, love, but I want it a little bit more defined. What is it that we need every day of our life? Yes, we do need the love of God. But there's a very special department of that love in forgiveness. Don't we need that every day? Of course we need it every day. Now, brothers and sisters, let's ask a question. If Yahweh does actually want to manifest himself, and one of his characteristics, and one of the most needful characteristics for us today, is forgiveness, think about how that would ever be drawn on before Adam and Eve sinned. How would it ever be exercised and demonstrated? You see, brothers and sisters, back in the garden, not everything that Yahweh wanted to be made manifest could be made manifest. Sin had to come. It had to come. And by that very means, Yahweh has been drawn on to give a demonstration of himself that could never have been done in the ideal circumstances in the garden. So you can quite clearly see that it was not human salvation, it was God manifestation. That was the purpose of the eternal Spirit. And it is those teachings that don't allow us to quickly get aside in the teachings of mere humanitarianism. Now, we had a discussion with a couple of brethren, and one of the brethren said, you know, I have real trouble with this and that that's emerging in the brotherhood. He's to be commended. because he knows the difference between those two things. But he also knows, brothers and sisters, that the manifestation of Yahweh can't take place in its entirety, in its fullness, until there is a salvation of a multitude. And that will occur, and it will occur on the basis of the manifestation of God in the earth. But we must fix our gaze on the manifestation of God. And brothers and sisters, do you think that if that is our fixation, that salvation will be denied? Would it be possible that that would be denied if that's our fix in mind? The answer is obviously no. Because it will be of the utmost pleasure that Yahweh knows what's happening. Now we have seen from Exodus chapter 19 verses 4 and 5 and 6 that the original intention of Yahweh was for that whole nation to be a nation of priests. And while in that generation it suddenly shrunk down to a tribe and down to a family within the tribe, that did not thwart Yahweh's intention to do exactly what he said in Exodus 19. He will do that in the future, and it's not far away. When he takes to himself his own nation to whom he gave that promise, and he will fulfill that promise, because there will be a generation of Jews that are soon brought into existence. They'll have their hearts of stone removed, they'll be given a heart of flesh, and the words of Yahweh will be wonderfully inscribed on the fleshy tablets of their hearts. And it will therefore be a fulfillment of those words in Exodus chapter 19. And what will happen? They will be a marvellous influence to every other person on the face of the earth. Do you think it through, brothers and sisters? If there's going to be any examples in the kingdom of God, they're not going to be the saints. Because people will merely say, oh yeah, but you people can't sin. How then are you an example to us? There'll be a nation, and there'll be an absolutely wonderful nation called the nation of Israel, who will provide that example to all the earth. And when anybody comes up to the the temple of Ezekiel's prophecy to make their offering, they will have to walk through the midst of these people, and they'll see a glorious people in whom they will not be able to find iniquity. And the record of the Bible tells us that. So now we come to another couple of principles that we need to keep in mind whenever we are looking into the Bible. And one of them is in Leviticus chapter 10. We haven't finished in Exodus 25 yet, but come over to Leviticus chapter 10. We're going to refer to this tomorrow morning, God willing. It's on the occasion of the induction of the priests. And we know how things went badly wrong on that 8th day of this lovely occasion. So we read in verse 2, there went out fire from Yahweh and devoured those two wicked sons of Aaron, and they died before Yahweh. Then Moses said unto Aaron, this is that Yahweh spake, saying, I will be sanctified. Now, what more holy being can we imagine than Yahweh? None. So, Moses is constrained to say to Aaron, this is that which Yahweh commanded, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me. Brothers and sisters, it's clear, isn't it? It's God's manifestation. I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me. And before all the people, I will be glorified. And on that day, Yahweh was not sanctified in the people, and especially in those two wicked sons. And therefore, Aaron and Moses, having been in contact with their dead bodies, were rendered ineffectual to proceed with the lovely occasion that was destined to be on that occasion. So there's the principle for us. I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me. And let them make me a sanctuary, verse 8 says, that I may dwell among them. Now, if you have not looked at this little exercise before, please look at it now, brothers and sisters, because here is a little statement that you can easily write down on a piece of paper. And it's those three things that I may dwell among them. If we talk about the three, there's only three, and there's more, but there's only three figures in the Bible. And one of them is Yahweh, and one of them is His Son, and the other one is us. There's really no other figures in the Bible. They are the only personages that are in the whole of the Bible. Because if it's not Yahweh and it's not Christ, it's us. It's men. And there's only three teachings in the Bible. And those three teachings are what Yahweh is, what we are, and how to righteously join those two opposing parties together. That's all there is in the Bible, brothers and sisters. Oh, you'll say there's plenty of other things. But they are so much in subjection to those three things. Because if we do not know those three things, there will be no kingdom of God. Because this is life eternal, that they might know Thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom Thou hast sent. So how are we going to write those three personages, those three parties? Are we going to write them God, Christ, and us? Or are we going to write them God, Christ, and us? It's clear that it must be God, Christ, and us. Because across the page signifies equality. There is no equality there. And here is a descending order of rank. God, Christ, and us. So what is the purpose of the building of this sanctuary? And all things related to it? That I may dwell among them. Now we come back to verse 3. Because there were many willing-hearted people in Israel. And yet even though they were willing-hearted, they were still instructed as to the basic materials that Yahweh required for the building of this sanctuary. This is the offering which ye shall take of them, gold and silver and brass. Would we write them across the page, or would we write them down the page? Well, it's clear that there is a descending order of value in those three metals. We would write them gold, silver and brass. And then there's three colours that are mentioned here in verse 4. And they are blue and purple and scarlet. Two of them are colours of the rainbow, one of them is not. So what's the blue? Well, the blue is clearly indicating heaven. So here is God. The red is clearly us. But what's the purple? Well, the purple is a colour that is obtained by mixing together the red and the blue. So we've got a perfect equation here. We've got God, Christ and us. We've got I may dwell among them. We've got gold and silver, which is the price of redemption, which was the price offered for Christ. And brass. And we've got blue and a mixture of blue and scarlet, which is quite clearly mediation. And blue, purple and scarlet. So we can make up a little chart in our Bibles, brothers and sisters, and that chart will hold good everywhere in the Bible. The name that Jesus was going to be given when he was born, the angel revealed it, and he said his name is going to be Emmanuel, which is God with us. Not us with God, God with us. A descending order of value. But clearly the purple indicates something in the middle. Now here are some of the basic materials that were going to be inworked into all the features of the tabernacle. And they are especially inworked into the parts of the high priest's garments. And when we turn back to Exodus chapter 28, we read from verse 1, Thou shalt take unto thee Aaron thy brother and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office, even Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar and his sons. So we've got Aaron as the presiding party over this group, and we've got his 4 sons listed off. They are the persons whom Yahweh has said, even before the test has been put in Exodus chapter 32, they are the persons who have been selected to be the priests for Yahweh among the children of Israel. And then it says in verse 2, thou shalt make holy garments for Aaron thy brother, for glory and for beauty. Now, young ladies, sisters, brethren too, young men, is ornamentation being encouraged here? These garments are going to be for glory and for beauty. Yes, they are being encouraged. Ornamentation is very definitely a part of the purpose of God. And we speak of the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, because they will be to the glory of God. And that's what these garments were for. They were all of them properly made, precisely ordained, exquisitely made by skillful hands, so that they all might reflect to the glory and the beauty of Yahweh. And we have to, brothers and sisters, keep Yahweh before us, and we will learn to behold his beauty, because his beauty is unsurpassed and unsurpassable. We've got to learn to worship Yahweh in the beauty of holiness. And it's only within the framework of that spirit of holiness that we can properly worship such a wonderful being. And we speak about a wonderful being, brothers and sisters, and he is a wonderful being. And there's a lovely secret given to Moses. Some people, unfortunately, don't think that Yahweh has a body and parts. Well, we are told that in the dispute between Miriam and Aaron and Moses, when they said that Moses took too much upon him, and they wanted his office, Yahweh said, you step away, you people, and what I'll do with my friend Moses is I will show him my similitude. I'll show him my shape. Because I can trust Moses. I can't trust the rest of the people of Israel, but I can trust Moses that he will not make a god and say, oh, this represents God. He won't do that. I know that man. He's trustworthy in all his ways. And so there was a marvellous secret unlocked to those people. And Yahweh is clearly saying in Deuteronomy 4 that we looked at, he's saying, there's one thing I withheld from all the other nations. And you know what it is, brothers and sisters? It's Yahweh himself that was hid from all other nations. And it was given only to Moses and to those who were of the brand of faith of Moses. They understand that. We understand that. And people sometimes reject that. Brothers and sisters, just in advance, can we imagine the disappointment of Jesus Christ ascending to the right hand of his Father and having been met by a blob of abstract power? Would you be joyful at that? You could only be joyful if you actually met a lovely and a very sentient being. You would only be happy if you met somebody who was in your same image and you knew he was your Father. And that's the kind of joy that our Lord Jesus Christ experienced when he finally got to his Father's right hand. Now, brothers and sisters, we might be getting away from the track, but we're not really getting away from the track. We're looking at the very reasons why these garments were made in such a lovely fashion as they were. Now, when we add them up, the basic garments that were to be embellishing the high priest for glory and for beauty were 6. That sounds funny, doesn't it? But they numbered 6. And there was one other one that was a foundation garment. So if we turn over to the end of this chapter, in verse 41, These items are expressly stated to have been made in verse 40 for glory and for beauty, as it was open to Moses in the second verse of the chapter. And then we go on to read in verse 41, Thou shalt put them upon Aaron thy brother, and his sons with him, and shalt anoint them, and consecrate them, and sanctify them, that they minister unto me in the priest's office. And thou shalt make them linen breeches to cover their nakedness. From the loins even unto the thighs they shall reach. Now, brothers and sisters and young people, here is an amazing feature of the garments that were made for the high priest. There was, as it were, a pair of very short briefs that were just to cover his nakedness. And it was expressly designed so that those little linen garments would not allow the garments for glory and for beauty to touch that part of his body. Why? Well, brothers and sisters and young people, the answer to that is that the whole of the Bible, and the law of Moses in particular, is simply an exploded view of how God saw the events unfold in Eden as a result of sin. And what did the man and the woman do as soon as they had been approached, or even before they had been approached by the Elohim? As soon as they had sinned, and they hadn't sinned, brothers and sisters, until they actually ate the fruit. But as soon as they ate the fruit, there was a rather amazing change came over them. Their eyes were opened, and they had never seen things like they now could see them. And they saw that they were naked, and they were ashamed, and they were afraid before the angels. That was absolutely terrible, brothers and sisters, because just before they had been able to walk in sweet fellowship with those angels. Now they're suddenly afraid of them. A terrible thing happened as a result of that. And Yahweh is hereby directing our attention to how he viewed all that train of events and the fruits of it. Because we know very well that as a result of their sin, there has now been an hereditary disease that is in our members, that is passed on from one generation to the other, to Jesus Christ himself. And it's that area, the area of reproduction, that Yahweh says will not touch my garments for glory and for beauty. All the rest of the garments that were bestowed upon that man were all designed to show forth the glory and the beauty of Yahweh. And this little word here, linen breeches, is not the same word for linen as in other parts of the dress of the high priest. It was a coarser fabric than the fine linen into which were inworked the lovely colours of blue and purple and golden threads into the garments of the high priest. They were all for the glory and beauty of Yahweh. They were to show forth his name and the glory and the wonder of it to the whole nation of Israel. They alone, 9 of them, are for glory and for beauty, but only 6 of them were actually garments. The others were embellishments like the girdle and the breastplate and the crown of righteousness on the head. So, brothers and sisters, I don't think we're going to go any further at the moment, because if I start, lunchtime will be here and we won't be able to have lunch on time. So just for the moment, we've only, and I did never intend to cover all the garments of the high priest. Please don't think that. And I might add one other thing. Please don't ask me how the Urim and Thummim worked. Because I don't know. I know it's a question that a lot of people's minds get working on, but I give up. And that doesn't mean you have to give up. But I've given up trying to work it out. There must have been some mechanics about it. If anybody's got an answer, I'm happy to hear it. So we can see by the start and the finish of this chapter, class members, that the glory and the beauty were strictly confined to the 9 articles of this priest's clothing and the embellishments upon it. But it is not, this little section, verses 42 and 43, are not within the confines of verse 2, which tell us they are for glory and for beauty, and verse 40, which ends by saying that they were for glory and for beauty. So I think we can see so far that these garments will expound to us the glory of the name of Yahweh, which of course, if embraced by us, and if in some way copied by us, it will lead to that lovely spirit of holiness without which no man will see the Lord.